From buried truths to shared unease, Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries explained. The Falmer. The Falmer are disturbing because they aren't a fallen civilization. They're a civilization that was deliberately interrupted and forced to keep going in a broken form. Everything we encounter underground contradicts the idea that the Falmer are mindless creatures. They don't move randomly. They patrol defined areas. They set traps and choke points and ambush from positions that favor sound rather than sight. They retreat when overwhelmed and regroup in numbers. This isn't animal behavior. It's tactical behavior adapted to blindness. Their environment tells the same story. Falmer settlements aren't chaotic nests. They're organized spaces. Living areas are separated from guard routes. Chorus aren't just present. They're managed. Eggs are protected. Adult Chorus are deployed like tools or weapons. There's also clear evidence of ritual, totems, markings, guarded chambers that serve no practical purpose in combat. These spaces exist for meaning, not survival, and meaning requires memory. Lore fills in what the environment implies. The Falmer were once the Snow Elves, a surface-dwelling civilization with cities, religion, and culture. After the Night of Tears nearly wiped them out, they turned to the Dwemer for refuge. The Dwemer didn't kill them. They blinded them, slowly, systematically, across generations, through toxins that removed sight and erased the ability to pass down history, language, and written knowledge. The Snow Elves weren't destroyed. They were rendered incapable of remaining what they were. This is what makes the Falmer so unsettling. They didn't lose a war. They didn't collapse internally. They weren't wiped out by time. They were modified. What we see in Skyrim isn't a species regressing into savagery. It's a society rebuilding itself under extreme constraint. Intelligence survived. Social behavior survived. What didn't survive was continuity. Every generation had to relearn what it meant to exist without ever knowing why they were underground in the first place. That means the Falmer aren't frozen in a tragic end state. They're still adapting, and adaptation doesn't stop. Given enough time, a culture shaped entirely by darkness, isolation, and hostility toward the surface will stabilize. Traditions will harden. Belief systems will form around survival rather than memory. Violence won't feel like cruelty. It'll feel like inheritance. Skyrim never lets us see where that process leads. Instead, it drops us into the middle of it as invaders, and never asks us to acknowledge what we're interrupting. There's no quest to cure the Falmer, no attempt to communicate, no recognition that what we're killing might be the early stages of a new civilization. That silence is intentional, because the Falmer aren't meant to be a tragedy you resolve. They're meant to be a reminder of what happens when survival is offered without mercy, and how long the consequences can last. And if the Falmer show what happens when a people are reshaped against their will, the next mystery asks the obvious follow-up: who had the power to do that to an entire civilization? And what happened when they finally went too far? The Dwemer. The Dwemer are disturbing because they didn't fear the gods. They believed existence itself was something that could be engineered, optimized, and ultimately overwritten. Everything the Dwemer left behind reflects a worldview that rejected reverence in favor of control. Their cities aren't built like temples or palaces. They're industrial, functional, purpose-driven. Pipes run through walls. Automatons patrol on schedules. Doors open and close based on logic, not ritual. Even their greatest achievements weren't acts of worship. They were experiments. The Dwemer studied the heart of Lorkhan not as a divine relic, but as a power source. Tonal architecture wasn't magic fueled by belief. It was mathematics, resonance, and sound used to alter reality at a structural level. To the Dwemer, gods weren't sacred beings. They were flawed systems that could be replicated or improved. And then there's the disappearance. When the Dwemer vanished, they didn't leave bodies. They didn't leave ghosts. In a world overflowing with restless spirits and lingering souls, the absence of Dwemer remains is almost louder than any ruin. What they did leave behind is even more unsettling. Fully operational cities. Automatons still follow commands. Defense systems still activate. Elevators still run. Their infrastructure didn't decay the way other civilizations' ruins did. It simply kept going, as if waiting for input that never came. That's what makes the Dwemer fundamentally different from every other lost civilization in Skyrim. They didn't collapse because of arrogance or decadence. They didn't fall to invasion or internal decay. They reached a point where their understanding of reality became incompatible with reality itself. When Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorkhan, the Dwemer weren't attempting destruction. They were attempting translation, rewriting their existence into a state that no longer relied on gods, fate, or limitation. And the result wasn't chaos, it was removal. The universe didn't punish them publicly. It didn't leave a warning. It simply corrected the problem by erasing the Dwemer from the equation entirely. That outcome reframed frames every Dwemer ruin you explore. These aren't monuments to failure. They're remnants of a civilization that got far enough to test the boundaries of existence, and crossed one that couldn't be crossed twice. The machines still running aren't proof of success. They're proof that the rules remained intact, even after the people who tried to rewrite them were gone. And if the Dwemer believed reality could be controlled, the next mystery reveals where that belief was pushed the furthest. Because beneath Skyrim itself lies the place where they tried to build a world that didn't need the surface at all. Blackreach. Blackreach is disturbing because it proves the Dwemer didn't just study reality. They tried to replace the world above with one that could survive without it. The scale of Blackreach immediately breaks expectations. This isn't a mine or a hidden laboratory. It's a vast, self-contained environment. Artificial skies glow overhead. Energy sources power cities spread across enormous distances. Transportation systems connect districts designed for long-term use. This place supports life. Falmer don't merely hide here. They inhabit it. Settlements are established. Territory is defended. Creatures have evolved around the constant glow of bioluminescent flora. Even the crimson Nirnroot exists only here, altered by isolation in a way nothing on the surface ever was. Most unsettling of all is how intact it feels. Blackreach didn't collapse when the Dwemer vanished. It didn't cave in, flood, or decay into chaos. It kept functioning quietly beneath Skyrim, unnoticed, while history played out above, and Skyrim never explains how long it was down there. That silence changes what Blackreach represents. This wasn't an experimental side project. It was infrastructure, a contingency, a place designed to exist independently of surface politics, divine interference, or environmental collapse. The Dwemer weren't just preparing to transcend reality, they were preparing for the surface world to become irrelevant. Blackreach reframes Dwemer ambition entirely. They didn't just want godhood, they wanted autonomy from the entire structure of the world, a reality where sunlight, weather, and even history weren't necessary conditions for survival. And when the Dwemer disappeared, Blackreach didn't fail, it adapted. New inhabitants moved in. New ecosystems stabilized. The world below kept going without its creators, a replacement world that never needed to announce itself. That realization unsettles players because it suggests the surface of Skyrim isn't the foundation of the world. It's just the most recent layer. And if Blackreach shows what happens when a civilization tries to outlast the world itself, the next mystery reveals the opposite response to eternity. Those who didn't try to replace time, but instead learned how to rule by waiting for it. The Dragon Priests. The Dragon Priests are disturbing not because they survived death, but because death was never meant to stop them in the first place. Everything about the Dragon Priests suggests preparation, rather than desperation. Their resting places aren't crude tombs or mass graves. They're sealed structures built to endure centuries without decay. Stone doors lock from the inside. Inner chambers are protected by layered defenses. Traps are positioned not to keep intruders out forever, but to delay them. Then there are the masks. Each Dragon Priest mask isn't just a symbol of rank. It's a conduit, a vessel that stores power, enhances longevity, and preserves identity. Even separated from their wearers, the masks remain potent artifacts, capable of altering reality itself when gathered together. And when a Dragon Priest awakens, their behavior tells you everything you need to know. They aren't confused. They don't react like beings ripped out of time. They don't question where the world went. They rise, assess the situation, and act, as if the centuries between then and now barely register. This is what makes the Dragon Priests unsettling on a deeper level. They didn't cling to immortality out of fear. They weren't trying to escape death the way leeches or necromancers do. They treated death as an inconvenience. The dragon cult was built on certainty. Certainty that dragons were eternal, that Alduin would return, and that mortal rebellion was a temporary disruption, not an ending. From that perspective, waiting wasn't a risk, it was strategy. Time, to the Dragon Priests, wasn't something that eroded power. It was something that filtered out the weak. Empires would rise and fall. Faith would fracture. History would forget. But when the world circled back, and they believed it always would, they intended to still be there. And in an uncomfortable way, they were right. Dragons do return. Alduin does reappear. The old order almost reasserts itself. The only thing that truly changed was the presence of the Dragonborn, an anomaly they didn't plan for, which reframes the Dragon Priests entirely. They aren't relics of a failed regime. They're remnants of a system that assumed it would eventually resume control. A system that wasn't defeated, just interrupted. And if the dragon priests prove that some power structures don't die but simply wait, the next mystery asks something even worse. What happens when authority doesn't even need to wait at all? Helgen, fate didn't choose you. It replaced someone. The opening of Skyrim is disturbing because it suggests you weren't chosen by destiny. You were simply the most convenient person to die. The game begins with you bound on an execution cart in Skyrim, heading toward Helgen. Everyone else on that cart has context. Ulfric Stormcloak is a political prisoner. Ralof is a captured rebel. Lokir is a thief who panics and tries to run. You, on the other hand, have no crime, no accusation, and no explanation. When the Imperial officer checks the list, your name isn't there. That should stop the execution. Instead, the response is chillingly casual. Forget the list. He goes to the block. No investigation, no delay, no concern. You're not being punished for something you did. You're being processed because the system has already decided someone needs to die. Even after Alduin attacks, nobody ever follows up. No one asks who you were, why you were there, or whether the execution was a mistake. The moment passes, and the world moves on. This reframes the entire narrative in a quiet but unsettling way. Skyrim is a world obsessed with prophecy, lineage, and divine selection. Yet your story begins without any of that. You aren't identified as special. You aren't recognized as important. You are entirely disposable, and that's the key detail. Destiny doesn't intervene because you were chosen. Destiny intervenes after you survive. The moment you live through something you weren't supposed to, the world adapts around you. Prophecy bends. Gods take notice. History rewrites itself to accommodate the anomaly that slipped through the cracks. In other words, the Dragonborn wasn't selected in advance. The Dragonborn was retrofitted into the story. That implication unsettles players because it strips away the comfort of fate. Greatness doesn't come from worthiness or prophecy. It comes from surviving a system that never intended to spare you. Helgen isn't the beginning of a hero's journey. It's proof that the world is willing to kill the wrong person and call it order. And if Helgen shows how easily a system can erase someone by mistake, the next mystery goes even further, exploring what happens when power no longer needs identity, proof, or even a living voice to function at all. The Daedric Princes. The Daedric Princes are disturbing because they don't corrupt the world by force. They reveal how easily people will do it themselves when the rules stop pushing back. Every Daedric encounter begins the same quiet way. A voice reaches out with clarity instead of menace. There's no grand deception, no moral camouflage. Each prince is upfront about who they are and what they value. Molag Bal doesn't hide domination behind noble language. He frames cruelty as inevitability. Boethia treats betrayal as a tool for sorting the strong from the weak. Sheogorath makes chaos sound playful, even therapeutic. None of them pretend their requests are harmless. They just make them specific. What's crucial is how these quests are structured. You're rarely rushed. You're given time to consider the request, understand the task, and weigh the reward. And those rewards matter. Daedric artifacts aren't cosmetic trophies. They're powerful, build-defining tools that meaningfully change how the game plays. Afterward, nothing reacts. The towns don't whisper, the guards don't comment, the world doesn't tilt toward punishment or redemption. From Skyrim's perspective, what you did registers as a completed objective, nothing more. That lack of response is where the unease lives. The Daedric Princes aren't testing your morality, they're testing the system. They operate in a space where consequences are delayed, diffuse, or invisible. By doing so, they expose a weakness in how meaning is enforced. If wrongdoing isn't immediately corrected, does it still matter? Skyrim never answers that question for you, and that's intentional. The moment the game labels your choice as evil, it turns the experience into a lesson. Instead, it treats your actions as data points, decisions made under conditions of clarity and incentive. This reframes the princes as something more subtle than villains. They're not trying to conquer Tamriel. They're running long-term experiments on agency. Each contract measures how far someone will go when the universe offers no immediate resistance and no visible cost. And the uncomfortable truth players discover is that saying yes doesn't require desperation. It often requires convenience. The task is manageable. The reward is useful. The harm is someone else's problem. By the time you realize what you've agreed to, you've already benefited, and the game has moved on. That lingering silence isn't a flaw. It's the point. Power doesn't always announce itself with spectacle. Sometimes it just asks politely and waits to see who accepts. And if the Daedric Princes show how easily authority works with consent, the next mystery strips even that away, revealing what happens when power continues operating without a voice, a body, or proof that it ever existed at all. The Night Mother. The Night Mother is unsettling in a way that sneaks up on you. At first, it feels almost theatrical, a corpse wrapped in ritual. a coffin hidden beneath a sanctuary. Whispers in the dark that sound just vague enough to be mystical without committing to anything concrete. Most players' first reaction isn't fear, it's skepticism, because the idea is absurd on the surface. An entire assassin order taking orders from a dead body. No witnesses, no verification, just faith and a lot of murder. And Skyrim never actually proves the Night Mother speaks. That's the important part. You're told she does. You're shown characters reacting as if she does. You're rewarded for obeying her commands. But the game never steps in to confirm that the voice is divine, supernatural, or even external, which means there are only a few possibilities, and all of them are uncomfortable. Maybe the Night Mother really does commune with Sithis, acting as a living conduit between mortals and a god of nothingness. That's unsettling on its own, but at least it follows the internal logic of the world, or maybe the voice is something else. A Daedric influence, a psychic projection, a remnant of belief so strong it manifests as perceived instruction. Or maybe there is no voice at all. Maybe the Dark Brotherhood has been operating on tradition and expectation for so long that the system no longer needs a source. Orders are interpreted, authority is assumed, doubt is treated as heresy, and the machine keeps running. That's where the Night Mother stops being creepy and starts being disturbing, because whether she's real or not doesn't change the outcome. People still die, contracts are still fulfilled, loyalty is still enforced. From the outside, the Dark Brotherhood functions efficiently, regardless of whether its spiritual core exists. The Night Mother doesn't need to be proven because questioning her would destabilize the structure built around her, and Skyrim never lets you challenge that. You can't expose the truth, you can't demand proof, you can't pull the thread and see what happens. You either participate or walk away. What makes this mystery resonate with players worldwide is how familiar it feels. Not as fantasy horror, but as a real-world pattern. Systems built on belief don't collapse when the belief is questioned. They collapse when people stop acting as if it matters, and the Dark Brotherhood hasn't reached that point. So the Night Mother remains, sealed in her coffin, issuing commands that may or may not be divine, while an entire organization continues to kill in her name. Skyrim never tells you which explanation is correct. It just lets the system persist, quietly, efficiently, and without accountability. And if the Night Mother shows how power can persist without proof or presence, the next mystery asks something even more uncomfortable. What happens when the world itself starts bending around a single person instead? The Dragonborn. The Dragonborn is disturbing because the world doesn't just respond to you, it waits for you. Over time, a pattern becomes hard to ignore. Major events in Skyrim don't resolve themselves. Civil unrest stalls. Dragons don't reappear until you do. Ancient threats sit dormant, sometimes for centuries, until the moment you step into the right place. Quests pause in a state of permanent tension. NPCs repeat the same lines. Entire regions remain frozen in crisis, until your involvement triggers progression. Even prophecy bends around your presence. It doesn't guide you forward so much as activate once you arrive. Then there's the way power accumulates. You absorb dragon souls effortlessly. You master abilities in days that took others lifetimes. Gods don't test you, they negotiate. Ancient forces don't overwhelm you, they adapt. The world seems less interested in stopping you than in accounting for you. And when you stop playing, everything stops with you. Wars don't conclude, rebellions don't escalate, suffering doesn't resolve or worsen. Skyrim holds its breath indefinitely. This reframes the Dragonborn as something far stranger than a chosen hero. You aren't simply powerful, you're a narrative pressure point, a stabilizing anomaly that allows stalled systems to move forward. The world doesn't revolve around you because you're righteous. It does so because nothing progresses without a focal point. That's unsettling because it strips away the romance of destiny. The Dragonborn isn't a savior sent to fix the world. You're a mechanism, a catalyst that forces resolution by existing where nothing else can. And that kind of power is isolating. You don't share it. You don't pass it on. You don't even fully understand it. Skyrim never acknowledges this directly, but the implication lingers. Without you, the world is inert. With you, it reshapes itself just enough to keep functioning, which raises an uncomfortable question players rarely like sitting with. Is the Dragonborn protecting the world, or is the world trapped in a state that only functions while you're watching? And if the Dragonborn shows how reality can bend around one person, the next mystery pulls back even further, revealing what happens when an entire war exists, not to be solved, but simply to continue. The Civil War. The Skyrim Civil War is disturbing because it isn't meant to be resolved. It's meant to persist, regardless of who wins. On the surface, the war looks like a familiar choice. Imperials or Stormcloaks? Order versus independence? Stability versus identity? The game frames it like a decision that will define the future of Skyrim. But once you actually participate, the cracks start showing. Battles are strangely contained. Cities change banners, but daily life barely improves. Key figures survive or disappear with little consequence. Even after the war concludes, dialogue reflects exhaustion rather than relief. Guards sound tired. NPCs speak as if something unresolved still lingers. Most telling of all is how little the larger forces seem affected. The Falmer remain influential no matter the outcome. Skyrim's economy doesn't recover. Social divisions don't heal, they harden. The winner inherits a weakened province filled with resentment, grief, and political instability, and the war only moves forward when you intervene. Without the Dragonborn, it stalls indefinitely, locked in a perpetual state of tension. That's what makes the Civil War unsettling. It isn't a story about victory, it's a story about decline. Both sides are compromised before you ever choose. The Imperials are stretched thin, enforcing an unpopular peace under foreign pressure. The Stormcloaks fight for cultural identity, but their leadership relies on exclusion and mythologized grievance. Neither side is positioned to rebuild Skyrim into something stronger than it was before. The war exists to drain resources, morale, and unity. From that perspective, the Civil War starts to feel less like a struggle for the future and more like a symptom of something already broken. Skyrim isn't on the brink of collapse, it's already sliding, and the war is how that decay expresses itself. What's especially uncomfortable is how familiar this feels. The conflict isn't driven by hope, it's driven by fatigue, fear, and the refusal to back down. Resolution would require compromise, and compromise isn't something either side is capable of without losing the identity they're fighting for. So, the war doesn't aim for healing, it aims for continuation, and no matter who you side with, that's exactly what you get. And if the Civil War shows a world slowly breaking under its own weight, the final mystery asks something even darker. What happens when even death stops being an escape? Sovngarde is disturbing because it reveals that death, even in a promised afterlife, is not an ending. It's just another place something powerful can reach. Sovngarde is introduced as a reward, a warrior's paradise reserved for those who lived and died with honor. The songs, the myths, the Hall of Valor, everything about it suggests finality, rest, completion. Then you arrive, and the first thing you notice isn't glory, it's emptiness. The landscape is vast but quiet. Figures wander the mist, detached and subdued. Conversations don't sound triumphant, they sound stalled, as if everyone is waiting for something that hasn't happened yet. The Hall of Valor itself feels less like a celebration and more like a shelter. That unease sharpens when the truth becomes clear. Alduin feeds here, not symbolically, not metaphorically. He consumes souls in Sovngarde itself, which means the Nord afterlife, the ultimate destination, isn't beyond danger. It's part of the food chain. This changes everything. Sovngarde isn't a final refuge. It's a holding space, a place where identity persists just long enough to be taken. The dead aren't resting, they're delayed, and that delay only lasts as long as something stronger isn't hungry. What makes this unsettling isn't just Alduin's presence, it's what his presence implies about the structure of existence. Even the afterlife is subject to predation. Even gods can starve. Even eternity can be interrupted. Skyrim presents Sovngarde as beautiful because it has to be. If it looked like a nightmare, the truth would be obvious. Instead, the horror is quieter. The realization that no place is truly outside the system. Not the world of the living, not the realm of the dead, not even a paradise promised by myth. Sovngarde doesn't comfort you, it warns you. And once you understand that even death can be compromised, you're left with one final uncomfortable thought. If there's nowhere beyond reach, then nothing in Skyrim was ever truly safe to begin with. If you enjoyed Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries and want to see more, click the video on screen now.